Welcome everyone to New Mexico's virtual congressional event. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nicole Haynes. I'm with the Air Force Academy and an Admissions Liaison Officer, an ALO, and I'm going to be your facilitator for tonight. As it's noted in the chat, just make sure your microphones and videos are off. We should have most of that, but if not, please do check and make sure you stay on mute. So this is a great opportunity tonight to hear about the service academies as well as the New Mexico nomination process with your congressional offices. We'll talk about the New Mexico congressional nomination process by your representatives. We'll have a presentation on the details of the Air Force Academy, and then we'll have some time for question and answer. Mostly done via chat, but each presentation will have a time for some verbal Q&A, so for the benefit of everybody in the webinar. You can chat us questions at any time. And we have a few representatives from the Air Force Academy, ALOs like myself, but we also have newly graduated lieutenants from the Air Force Academy and representatives from the other service academies, West Point, Annapolis, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marines. Your representatives from the New Mexico congressional offices are on, or their staffing offices, I should say, as well as Air Force ROTC representatives. So we have a gamut of folks that can help you answer questions via chat tonight. So to get started, I know y'all can find the chat box because I've seen it already, but let us know who's in the audience. Please tell us the city or town that you're from. Just if you have a few seconds, type in that city, and we just want to know where our audience is throughout the state of New Mexico. Clovis, Los Alamos, Albuquerque, you guys are fast typers. Good deal. Santa Fe, we have folks from across the state, and that is awesome. So this virtual event is new for a lot of people due to this environment, but it is great to see that people were able to call in to get this information. So our chat monitors that are on there, you might also see a brief introduction from themselves about who they are and what they do, just so feel free to read that as we go through. We're going to work to answer your questions before the end of the session, which will end up around 8 o'clock. And as I mentioned, after each presentation, our speakers are going to take some time to do some verbal Q&A based on the information that comes in the chat. So feel free to ask questions about what it's like to go to the Academy or attend an Air Force ROTC program or what a career field's like. And some of our presentations, I think, will help answer these questions as well. But right now, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Dave Williams with Senator Udall's office.
Hey, good evening. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Haynes. Really appreciate it and appreciate everyone here joining us tonight. As you said, my name is David Williams, and I am the Academy Nominations Coordinator with Senator Tom Udall's office here in Albuquerque. Today, we're going to be providing an overview for everyone on the congressional nominations application process for those New Mexicans interested in attending one of the 5 military service academies. That would be the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York. We'll also be hearing later this week from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, which does not require congressional nomination. So for students who want to experience a military environment while getting a first-class education, the service academies are an outstanding opportunity with full 4-year scholarships. Graduates of all academies receive a Bachelor of Science degree and a commission as officers in their respective service branches. The competition for an appointment is fierce. What are the academies looking for? High academic performance and your standardized test scores, your involvement in athletics and extracurricular activities, your leadership experience and community involvement, and finally, for you to have a nomination. So today we'll be talking about the application process for a nomination for both of your U.S. senators and your 3 U.S. representatives. Now, as was mentioned, if you have any questions as we go through our presentation, don't hesitate to ask them in the Zoom chat. I have colleagues tonight from Senator Udall and Heinrich's office with me to help answer your questions. We'll also take additional questions at the end of my presentation before we pass it off to the Air Force Academy. We also have a copy of this presentation on Senator Udall's Academy nominations webpage for you to refer back to later. Next slide, please. Great. So there are multiple nominating sources available to New Mexicans under two categories, congressional and service-connected. Service-connected or presidential nominations are reserved typically for dependents of career military personnel. So if you think you might be eligible for this, I encourage you to reach out to an admissions officer at the academy that you're interested in for more information. Today, though, we're going to be jumping into the congressional nominations process. So most of you will be eligible to apply for a nomination from up to 4 congressional sources, both of your U.S. senators, your U.S. representative or House member, and from the office of the Vice President. Those of you wanting to compete nationally for a nomination from the Vice President should, again, talk to an admissions officer at the academy you're interested in attending for more information. Next slide, please. So every applicant for a nomination around the country must meet the following minimum requirements as of July 1st of the year that you hope to be attending an academy. That is, you must be at least 17 and not over the age of 23, be a US citizen, and have no legal obligations for a spouse or dependents. So if you can say yes to all 3 of these right away, we invite you to formally apply for a nomination. Next slide, please. So first, the Senate process. Senators Udall and Heinrich we've done our best to simplify the application process to be considered for a nomination. A formal packet consists of completing and submitting the following items by our deadline each year. That would be an online questionnaire and essays, getting us your official high school transcripts, or if you're in community college or university, those formal scholarship transcripts as well. Your official ACT and/or SAT test scores, and 3 letters of recommendation. Now, the due date for those who are applying to attend an academy next year is Friday, October 9th, 2020. So let's do a deep dive into each of these sections. Next slide, please. First, you should go to both Senator Udall and Senator Heinrich's website to set up an online profile. While the process and materials requested are nearly identical, you'll have to set up an online profile with each office. Then it's an opportunity for you to tell us about yourself. This is also an opportunity for you to really brag about everything you've accomplished and done during your high school career. Include every student organization and club you've participated in, every sport and team you've been a part of, every award you've received on and off campus, and of course, your paid and unpaid work experience. Third, this is where you'll also be able to rank your preference of academy. For example, if you only want to attend the Air Force Academy, you should list that as number 1 and leave the remaining options blank. If you're open to attending any of the academies, you should rank your preferences 1 through 4. Lastly, we ask you to submit an essay. Why do you want to attend a U.S. Service Academy? This essay question is the same for both Senate offices, and you may use the same essay responses for both. So you're encouraged to spend the time writing a quality response, use spell check, and have someone proofread it for you. Additionally, those of you applying with Senator Heinrich's office will be asked to submit an additional essay describing an experience where you have demonstrated exceptional leadership. Next slide, please. Now, we know that the ACT and SAT test can be intimidating to many, and not everyone takes tests well. So we encourage you to take it as the test of your choice as many times as possible to get your desired result. Like the Academy admissions offices, we will superscore all the results that you submit to our office, taking the highest score from each subject area to provide you a higher composite score. So for example, say you take the test the first time. You received high scores in math and reading, but low in science and English. However, on your second attempt, your results switch and you get high scores in science and English, but low in math and reading. Well, we're going to take the highest score from each of those subjects and provide you that higher composite score. Now, I know there's a lot of questions about and concerns about how you can maximize your testing ability due to the COVID-19 and the amount of tests that have been reduced. We understand that they may be offering additional numerous testing dates late summer, early fall. And so we'll do our best to continue to communicate those opportunities to you so that you can maximize those. I know there's questions that are coming up in the chat about that, and we'll do our best to get those answered for you. And then finally, on the ACT and SAT tests, we know that some are going to be offered right before or right after our October 9th deadline. Now, if you are registered or you end up registering for one of those, we certainly recommend that you contact each of your Senate offices and your House office and let us know that you're taking that. We'll put a placeholder in your file so that way you can continue to move forward in the process. As long as your scores come into us before the interview day itself, and then unfortunately at that time, no scores, no interview. Lastly, we ask for an official copy of your transcripts. This can come to us from the school, and it should include your fall schedule and unweighted GPA. Now, if you talk to your high school counselor or registrar, that's something that they'll be able to help you get processed. Next slide, please. Now, our offices place great emphasis on these letters of recommendation that we receive, as these individuals know you all best. They've seen your accomplishments and setbacks, your ingenuity and your grit. Now, because the culture at each academy is very competitive and academically rigorous, we want to ensure that those students being considered for nomination can compete. To help us do that, we ask for 2 letters of recommendation come from someone that knows you in an academic setting, a teacher, professor, counselor, principal. We particularly want to see letters from at least one of those that knows you in a math or a science setting. Your 3rd letter of recommendation can come from anyone who knows you well and can speak to your character, as long as there's no family relation. Sometimes students or their family think that requesting a letter from their local mayor, city councilor, or another elected official helps to carry more weight. However, that's usually not the case, as they'll often just repeat what's on your resume to us. So titles are less important here than someone who can really speak to your tenacity, your character, or your personal growth. It could be a family friend, someone that knows you from church, an employer. Think outside the box of who that individual might be. Once you've decided on who will write your letters, on your online profile, you will input their email address into the system, and a link will be generated from us to them, where they can then submit their letters to us directly. A lot of times questions come from those individuals about, well, what should I talk about? Well, we've got a guide as to what we're looking for in those letters, and that's on Senator Udall's website and Academy nominations page, which we'll have listed here at the end of the presentation. You can ask the 3 individuals that you talk to use the same letter they write for both your Senate offices, which encourages them to spend time writing you a bit stronger a letter. However, you should remind them to address the letters to the right office. We know that your counselors and teachers are very busy in the fall, especially at the start of the school year. And this is another opportunity that we found to help cut down on the pressures of asking them for letters. They can write you one solid letter and address it both to Senator Udall and address separately to Senator Heimer. Next slide, please. So once you set up your online profile, you'll have access to an online checklist, just like you're seeing here, that shows what we've received and what materials may be outstanding. As we receive items in, you'll notice a check mark will be in the box. If we have not yet received anything, it'll be blank, as you see currently on the screen in front of you. This tool will be your best friend as we approach the October 9th deadline, especially as it relates to any missing test scores, transcripts, or letters of recommendation. like I mentioned earlier, teachers and counselors are going to get many requests from other students for letters as well. So we recommend connecting with them early to allow them to work up and submit your letter well in advance of the deadline. In the top right corner, you'll see a reminder of the deadline. Because of the competitive nature of the application process, this is a hard deadline for all the congressional offices in New Mexico. And all materials must be in our office by that deadline. Again, we highly encourage you to begin gathering material early and reviewing your checklist frequently. Next slide, please. So what we just talked about is the process for Senator Udall and Senator Heinrich, which no matter where you are in New Mexico, you can apply with both offices, and we highly encourage you to do so. That third congressional nomination that we mentioned was your House of Representatives member. Depending on where you live in the state, that is going to vary. So if you live in the 1st Congressional District, or really the Albuquerque metro area and parts of the East Mountains, you will apply with U.S. Representative Deborah Holland's office. Unlike the Senate offices where you set up an online account, you'll actually go to her website, complete your application as a Word or a PDF document, and send it in to the office directly with your required items. So as you'll see there, in addition to the general application form and essay, you will send in 3 letters of recommendation, your official transcripts, and your official ACT and SAT test scores. Like we talked about on the Senate side, you can use the same essay and letters of recommendation that you submitted to the Senate offices in her application packet. Again, if you choose to do that, you should remind them to make sure they're addressing the letters to the right office. Again, the deadline for Representative Holland is Friday, October 9th, 2020. Next slide, please. So for those of you in the 2nd District, your Congresswoman is Representative Torres Small. Similarly to Representative Holland's process, you'll complete your application as a Word or a PDF document off of her website and email it into her office with your required items in a package. In addition to the general application form and essay, you'll send in your resume, 3 letters of recommendation, your official transcripts, and your official test scores. Again, as I had mentioned, you can also use the same essay and letters of recommendation that you submitted into the Senate offices in her packet. However, you should remind the authors of those letters to address them to the right office or send into the right office the correctly addressed letter. And actually, if you'll go back 1 slide, please. We've talked about that the deadline for all the offices is October 9th. However, if you complete your packet for her office, you'll be invited to interview in Albuquerque on October 31st. Next slide, please. The same with Representative Torres Small. Again, our deadline for all the offices is October 9th, and I'm mentioning that a lot because that's if you leave with nothing else after today, please remember that deadline. You'll be invited to interview with Representative Torres Small's office on November 8th in Las Cruces if you complete a full packet. Next slide, please. And then lastly, for those of you in the 3rd District or Northern and Eastern New Mexico, that's going to be Representative Lujan's office. Now, just like the process we've talked about, you'll complete your application as a Word or a PDF document off of his website, print it out and send it all in with your required items in a package. In addition to the general application form and essay, you will include a counselor evaluation, 2 letters of recommendation, your official transcripts, and official ACT, SAT test scores. You can use, again, the same essay and letters of recommendation that you submitted to the Senate offices in his packet. And again, just making sure that you remind the authors that you'll be asking for that letter in 3 different circumstances and make sure they're addressed appropriately. Next slide, please. So back to the Senate process. If you submit a complete application with Senator Udall and/or Senator Heinrich, you will be invited to interview in Albuquerque on Saturday, November 7th. Both offices conduct our interviews the same day at the same location to minimize travel to Albuquerque, especially for those of you who are coming in from out of town. We coordinate our scheduling to ensure you won't be booked for 2 interviews at the same time. Now, what are things you can do to prepare? Well, we certainly recommend having practice interviews. Talk to your parents, teachers, coach, or employer about setting up those practice interviews. Come dressed for the occasion. We certainly recommend business attire if you have it. Those in junior ROTC are welcome to come dressed in their uniform. And of course, we recommend arriving to our location at least 20 minutes early to give yourself time to prepare and not feel rushed, especially if you're not as familiar with the Albuquerque area. It gives you plenty of time to get there and be prepared for your interviews. Next slide, please. Now, what are we looking for in these interviews, or what are you going to be walking into? Well, your interviews are typically going to last about 20 minutes. These review boards are made up of 3 individuals with diverse backgrounds in military service, community, and higher education. Many are graduates of the academies themselves. Now, the review board is here to help recommend to the senators those candidates that they feel can handle the rigorous academics, the military lifestyle, and the ability to succeed. Panelists are not trying to trick or trip you up. Rather, they will have already reviewed all the materials that you sent in to us. So really, they're going to focus in on those areas of your essay, your academic history, your extracurricular and leadership involvement, character, determination, and your commitment to serve. Next slide, please. So while receiving a nomination from both of your senators or representative allows you to be considered by an academy, it certainly does not guarantee you an appointment. You should remember that in addition to going through this process with us, your members of Congress, you must also apply directly with the academies that you're interested in. The academies will also communicate additional requirements to you as you move through their process, including a medical and fitness assessment. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest questions that we get every year is how many nominations can Senator Udall make? Well, New Mexico senators and representatives use what's called the competitive nominations process. For each opening that is available every year, we will submit an unranked slate of up to 10 names to the Academy to consider. Now, this does not mean only one of the 10 will be accepted. However, it allows the other candidates to compete in other areas of admission and gives the Academy a wide berth to take New Mexicans who are nominated and put them up against other students around the country, those who are there looking for athletics, as well as other areas that the Academy is trying to build for that incoming class. Next slide, please. So everything up to now that we've talked about is the nominations application process. But I want to mention a couple of other opportunities that everyone here should consider. Because the process is so competitive for an appointment to a service academy, we really encourage you to consider applying with ROTC units at the collegiate level. In New Mexico, ROTC programs are available at New Mexico State University with Army and Air Force, ROTC, and the University of New Mexico, which has Army, Air Force, and Naval ROTC programs. Students in ROTC programs will graduate with your degree and a commission in the armed services. However, your studies take place in a traditional collegiate environment versus a military one. Scholarships and financial support are also available, and you'll hear about those opportunities during each of the academies' presentations when they mention their ROTC programs. Next slide, please. Other options available to you in New Mexico is the New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, which offers a couple things. One is a 2-year early commissioning program through Army ROTC, where you'll take your courses at NMMI Junior College before transferring to a four-year institution to complete your degree. The second thing I'll mention is the Service Academy Prep Program. And there's what's called sponsored and self-prep. On sponsored prep, due to the extremely competitive process, you may receive a nomination but not an appointment. There are situations that arise when an academy recognizes strong qualities in you and choose to offer you a scholarship through their foundation that allow you to focus on areas of improvement, academic or not. NMMI is actually recognized as one of several institutions in the country that serves as a preparatory school for all the academies. Students who go through a year of the prep program and choose to reapply with members of Congress for a nomination the following year often find themselves stronger candidates for both that nomination and ultimately that appointment. B, I'll mention, is the self-prep. Just like everything I just mentioned, though not sponsored by an affiliate of one of the academies like their foundations, you can choose yourself to enroll and participate in the same program and classes of the sponsored prep students. And again, scholarships and other financial assistance is available. And if that's of interest to you, I encourage you to please reach out to NMMI. And we're also happy as the delegation to connect you as well. So if you do want to connect with someone, just let us know and we're happy to do that. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of our timeline this year, we opened up the application process on April 6th and we'll be closing on October 9th, which, as I've mentioned, is a hard deadline. While it is over 5 months away, it will be here before you know it. The most important thing I can emphasize really is, especially for those of you who are looking to apply this cycle, who are rising seniors for the fall, or if you just graduated, really the big thing I can emphasize is communication with our offices and with those writing your letters of recommendation. If you have any questions as to your application or about something else, don't hesitate at all to give us a call or send us an email. The fall semester gets busy with school, athletics, life in general, and talking early and often with your teachers is key to making sure you don't fall to the bottom of their to-do list. Again, after October 9th, if you complete your application with each office, you'll be invited to interview with them, and there are the interview dates based on your location. And finally, what we try to do is by late November, mid-December, we make selections and we will send out letters to all individuals, regardless of if you got a nomination or not, just to close the loop with you and make sure that you have everything you need to know to move forward with pursuing the academy, or of course, your plan Bs, Cs, etc. Next slide. So that's our presentation. You'll see the names of the Academy nominations coordinators for each office and their websites. A copy of this PowerPoint presentation, other frequently asked questions, and a letter that you can give to those writing your letters of recommendation can be found on Senator Udall's website. I'll stop there. We'll go ahead and try to answer a few of the questions that we're seeing coming in off the Zoom chat, and then turn it back over to our host here at the Air Force Academy. So just perusing here some of the top questions that seem to be popping up is for those who are homeschooled. Great question. So your instructors at homeschool, whether that's your parent or if they're part of a larger group, have the ability to generate a transcript. And that's something that they can just send us. You can have them email to us directly. I know for the Senate offices, we have emails, special emails that are set up where folks can send that directly to us, and we'll get that processed. Great question. Folks talking about the ACT and do we prefer the writing area? Really, that's your choice. We certainly don't need the writing for our purposes. However, if you are looking at applying to other institutions, that might be something that they look at. So really that is your call, but for our our needs here, we won't take a look at that. Let's see.
Hey, Dave, Lieutenant Colonel Haynes here. One of
Yes,
the
ma'am.
frequently asked questions we get is, how many nominations do they need?
Great question, and that is a question that we also get. You know, because the process is, as I've mentioned, very competitive, we want you to maximize the number of nominations that you could be eligible for. That's why we want you to apply with both of your senators and your U.S. representative at the bare minimum. You may have a stronger ability to get a nomination from your House member, depending on how many people apply each year, because it is a smaller pool of students that you're competing against. Versus the Senate offices, you're competing against students across the state. And so we want you to maximize that. But once you get your nomination, you really, I think some people have different views. As long as you have that one nomination to get you in the door to be considered for admittance, that's what you need. Would it hurt if you had a couple extra nominations available to you as well? Absolutely not. Great. It looks like we've got some other questions coming in that are a bit more specific to their individual needs. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll turn it over back to Lieutenant Colonel Haynes for USAFA to have their presentation. But myself and colleagues will still be here on the group chat and answering all of your questions that you have now, or if something else comes up later this evening. So Lieutenant Colonel, back to you. And as she's preparing to come back on, one thing I do want to mention is that for the rest of this week, we're going to have this brief overview of the nominations application process tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, before we turn it over to the other academies that'll be presenting. So if you do not want to necessarily be here for the full presentation again, you may want to just log back on to the link that you used to join us this evening, maybe at about 6:15 or so. That way you can catch the tail end of it and be here for the next Academy's presentation. And then just one of the other questions I wanted to provide an answer to or follow up with was on getting a copy of this slide presentation. Again, we have that. If you go to that website that's listed there right now, under Senator Udall, both this PowerPoint is there. We also have some other helpful documents for you, a frequently asked questions document we put together, as well as that letter that you can provide individuals who you'd like to ask to write you a letter of recommendation. So with that, I will throw that now back to Lieutenant Colonel Haynes.
Mr. Williams, this is Gay Harrison. I'm substituting in for Colonel Haynes. I'm the regional director that covers New Mexico at the Air Force Academy. She had a little technical glitch. I did want to mention we have a special guest able to join us tonight, and that is Colonel Woodard, who is the commander at Air Force ROTC at New Mexico State University. Hopefully we've got her mic on. Colonel Woodard, if you're with us, please chime in and tell us a little bit about Air Force ROTC at your university.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Woodard. I am a Air Force Academy graduate from way back in 1997. I am currently serving as the Air Force ROTC Detachment Commander at New Mexico State. And even though I hope that every one of you is able to go to the service academy of your choice, that may not happen. And so I would encourage you to consider Air Force ROTC as or any of the other service ROTCs as a backup plan. For Air Force ROTC, we have a full up 4-year or 5-year scholarship that you could be eligible for if you're competitive for the Air Force Academy. So I would encourage you to also take a look at Air Force or AFROTC, AFROTC.com, and take a look at the high school scholarship program. We ask for a lot of the same information that service academies ask for. So most of your work is probably about done, but our eligibility window will open the 1st of June for you all to start applying for the HSSP, and it will end in January. So you have a little bit more time than the Service Academy nomination process.